let's get started. What I'll do is I'll explain how you do these kinds of questions first. I'll go through like what you need to include to get full marks because most of us, well, from what I heard, almost all of us figure out the pattern of inheritance, but then we just need to make sure we don't lose easy marks when we're actually writing it out, right? So firstly, if I'm given a pedigree question, this may not be asked, but sometimes it's a good idea just to annotate it. If I annotate it, it also makes it easier for me to reference it in the exam. So I can just annotate it like this. So this is the first gen, this is the second gen, this is the third gen, right? Then I'll just do individual 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. No, unfortunately not, right? And then I'll draw a key. So square, circle, shaded square, and then shaded circle, affected, or unaffected, I mean. Male, female, affected, male. All right, cool. So I've got this so far. I've just annotated my pedigree. You may or may not be asked to do this. Yes?
If we go into all of these
Depends on if the question is explicitly asked for it. Yeah.
question will be least
For this question, no. This question, no. But I'm just going to do it out of habit, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to determine our pattern of inheritance, right? So we know that we have a framework, right? So firstly, right, it's like a 3-step rule, right? We check if there is a skip generation, because if there is, it's most likely a recessive pattern of inheritance, right? So I look at my thing, do I have a skip generation? Well, no, it's present in all 3 generations, right? So I do not have a skip generation, right? So no skip gen. Therefore, it's probably not recessive, right? Then I want to check, right? Since there's no skip generation, I know that a differentiating factor between a sex-linked dominant or an autosomal dominant trait is that a large majority of females are affected, right? So I can say here, large majority, F affected, right? And then in this case, it's yes, right? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 6 people in my offspring that are affected by this disease. Therefore, I'm going to say it's probably a sex-linked dominant trait. Right? Now, here's where the confusion comes in, right? Some of us did it with an autosomal pattern of inheritance, autosomal dominant. That is actually also possible in this tree. The reason for that is, right, whenever something is sex-linked, you can't rule out the possibility of it being autosomal, right, in both cases, which means that sometimes in pedigrees, it can be both sex-linked dominant or autosomal dominant, or it can be both sex-linked recessive or autosomal recessive, right? That's where it can get a bit confusing. Actually, this year in the HSC was the first time they put a pedigree that could have been both. Usually they just say in the question, this is sex-linked to figure out which one it is, or this is autosomal to figure out which one it is, right? But this year, for some reason, they decided we're just going to give you a pedigree and it can be both and you got to figure it out, right? So I haven't seen the marking criteria because it doesn't exist yet. So I don't know how they're going to mark it, right? But I'm guessing we can probably acknowledge that both are possible, but say that one is more likely than the other, right? So I'm going to acknowledge, yes, in this pedigree, it's totally possible that we can have an autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance, right? But it's more likely that it's sex-linked because, right, no skip generation, so it's dominant, and there's a large majority of females affected, right? Which is why I'm going to guess it's sex-linked dominant, right? So what I'll do is I'll show you the framework we need to answer these kind of pedigree Punnett square questions. So for all Punnett square questions, whenever you're using it in your response, you need to have a few things, right? You need to have a key for your Punnett square. You need to have the actual Punnett square itself, right? You need to have the genotypic ratio, and you need to have the phenotypic ratio, right? If you do not have any of these 4 things, you can lose a mark, right? So make sure you have these 4 things, right? So what I might do is I'll I'll assign a key, right? So I think it's called Rett syndrome, right? So I'll just use R, right? So I'll just say capital R is Rett syndrome, and then lowercase r is normal, right? Then I'll do a Punnett square. It would be good in your response to mention which generation you're pulling it from, right? So I'm going to do a Punnett square for Gen 2 individuals, Gen 2 individuals 1 and 2, right? So individuals, so Gen 2, why did I draw 3 lines there? That's silly of me, right? Gen 2, 1, and then Gen 2, 2, right? So I'm just going to fill in my pedigree. So X, R, Y, X, R. The female is a carrier. So that gives us X, R, X, R.
So do you have to do a generation 2 person?
No, you can do generation 1 as well. I'm just going to do generation 2 just because I decided it. Right. Then you should have your genotypic ratio plus phenotypic ratio. Right. In this case, what is it? It's 1 of everything. Yeah, so 1. Right, and my phenotypic ratio, that's 1 female with Rett's, 1 male with Rett's, 1 female unaffected, so I'll just say UA, and 1 male UA, right? Cool, I have all my ratios, right? Then I can probably start to explain, right, how this is indicative of a sex-linked dominant pattern of inheritance. Now, upon reflection, I probably should have used generation 1 as a cross. It's much better at showing sex-linked dominant instead of generation 2. But yeah, it's already done. So that's probably just for you to know, right? On top of this, I'm not going to explain, I'm not going to write the full explanation, but somewhere in your statement, you should go according to these results, right? So according to the stuff I've written above, right, pattern of inheritance is sex-linked dominant, right? As a marker, I love it when students outline it because it makes it really easy for me to find and I can give it a mark really quickly. But you don't have to do that. But I would like it if you did that because it makes my life easier. But yeah, this is how you do the question. You can acknowledge that it's autosomal or it could possibly be autosomal dominant. That would be nice. And then you can just say it's more likely this one than the other one. Cool?